Hey guys, this is ManlyMouseDan, and welcome back to the developer's commentary of Memoirs. I am unsure how much time I have to devote to this video series, but I would at least like to cover some of the early quests in the game. And forgive me for being a bit rambly, this is more of a commentary on the game and the development process more than a real walkthrough. You'll probably notice that what I'm saying won't match up with whatever's happening in the video. Although, if you follow what's happening on the screen, you will probably get a sense of how to approach the game in a certain way. My gameplay footage probably looks like the world's most casual speedrunner. So I think for this run, I will be playing through all 4 main faction quests, and aim to get one of the better endings in the game. I won't be doing a detailed playthrough, such as showing all the different options to complete missions, the side content, or secrets, as that would probably take too long. Sometimes I forget how large the game can be, especially once you finish the early guild quests and the game opens up. Kind of like that moment from Breath of the Wild or Elden Ring where you can see a large vista underneath a beautiful horizon. Except if I made something like that, it would probably look like it was made in Microsoft Paint. Which reminds me, if any of the pixel art looks especially odd or out of place, it's probably because it was made by me and not the talented artist that made most of the original assets. So Memoirs, at least in my mind, is a combination of what I like most from the CRPG and JRPG genres. There's a lot of inspiration here from games that were pivotal for me when I was younger, such as the Infinity Engine RPGs like Baldur's Gate and Planescape Torment. And you'll probably notice a bit of BioWarean interaction with the characters, like out of Mass Effect. I wanted, in some part, to make a grand, sweeping RPG. Unfortunately, as a solo dev, I only have so many waking hours to devote to writing, art, eventing, coding, and everything else, so I had to scale down the game in many ways. One of those areas is a definite lack in polish and style. Even things such as NPCs being rather hard to click on is due to the fact that I didn't have time to fix the code that governed how hitboxes work. So I take a lot of shortcuts. The biggest one you may have already noticed is that the game is made in RPG Maker. RPG Maker is an engine I can sing praises about for at least an hour, and then complain for about a day at least. I think everyone who's worked with it probably has a similar experience, but it is a massive shortcut for me, as the majority of the game I want to make is already part of the default engine. The parts that are not, however, are a significant investment in time, as I use a lot of custom code plugins. Currently, Memoirs has 226 custom JavaScript code plugins, and that's a lot of code. Some of which were made by me, but most were, made by the helpful community that RPG Maker has. I'm not a coder or an artist or sound designer. I don't know my way around UI design or animation or marketing. But as a solo dev, you have to learn a bit of everything. It's a monumental amount of work. It is essentially doing the job of everyone in a regular game dev studio. But hey, it's a dream job, or at least my dream job. And chasing your dreams requires a lot of work. Usually a lot of luck too. It probably wouldn't surprise those of you who play the game to learn that I'm primarily a writer. The world of Moonfall has been knocking around in my head for a very long time now, probably well over a decade at this point. It originally started off as one of my many bug projects, but I got into game development because, well, it's what I always wanted to do, besides being a novelist. And also because the interactive nature of the video game medium lends itself to new ways of exploring narrative. I know it's weird to say that I'm in it for the art when I make porn games, but it's true in a way. This is something that I quit a stable, nice paying job for, and it was a huge gamble at the time, and financially speaking, I'm still not sure if it's paying off. But the heart wants what the heart wants, and I wanted to be a storyteller. And also to make a game with giant anime titties. The story of A Memory of Eternity is vast. Lots of characters, lots of moving parts, But I think now with Memoirs, you start to get a sense of what's really happening. I think the series will be one that, while you don't have to play the other games, they do offer new knowledge and secrets about the setting and the main plot. There are central characters to the franchise, and you actually meet a lot of them in Memoirs, and you'll see them again in the sequel. One of the experiments I wanted to try with the series is to not make the player the main protagonist, or the chosen one, or whatever. That character does exist, and you do meet them, but the player's role in the games is always that of a very important supporting character, not actually the protagonist of the series. I think in some ways this solves a lot of issues that CRPGs and JRPGs naturally conflict over. The problem that writers always have with video games. It's agency versus narrative. Giving greater player agency handicaps narrative and vice versa, but if the player character isn't the most important person in your game, and they really shouldn't be in my opinion, as I prefer a bit more realism, then it opens up a lot of options. I also have a bunch of other stuff I'm trying out, including some more meta fourth wall breaking stuff, but where that's heading I'll keep a secret still. There is a method to the madness, I promise. My first two games were hyperlinear, so with Memoirs I wanted more of a sandbox. And it was definitely a headache, as I feel like I reinvented some wheels while making the game. There are probably easier and more efficient ways to make this kind of RPG, while I kind of ignored best practices and just did my own thing. Players will notice across the board that things are different than what they're used to in other RPGs. Sometimes unique is better, but sometimes it's also stupid, and that's why nobody does it that way. There's a lot of mechanics in Memoirs, and I mean a lot. I once set out to list all the separate mechanics, and eventually I just gave up because there was no real point. A big list of mechanics might look good on a box or a Steam page, but it doesn't always translate to a good game. What I wanted for Memoirs is to give the player the impression that they are in a lived-in world, a popular marketing phrase for games nowadays. That just means a believable setting. The player is immediately given the job as they play a facilitator and the employee of the Courtesans Guild. There's no getting around that, and you really can't quit your job, at least not until the end of the game. For better or for worse, that is the role of your player. But what's a facilitator? What's the Courtesans Guild? Where are all these people and all these names thrown at me from character creation? I did go back and add a lore intro, but I believe the best way to explore the world is to actually play the game and expand your understanding through context. I wanted there to be a main conflict in the game, one that the player needs to be involved in, but not necessarily swallowed up by. So as we can see here during the early guild quests, that is the civil war that eventually breaks out between the separate factions of the courtesans. The player's main goal is essentially securing their continued employment. You go out and try to gain the support of at least one major faction in helping you to end the guild's war, but of course in standard RPG fashion you get roped into other things. Or rope on other things. Okay, I won't do any more of those. Aren't you happy I didn't put more of my bad humor into the game? Anyways, early game is probably the hardest section, especially with combat. This is mostly because not only are most players still learning the ropes, but you don't get a lot of level ups where you can increase your stats and try out new skills. I'll probably do a more detailed dive into combat and character customization in the next video. Memoirs might also trap some players, as a lot of combat is avoidable. The downside is if you avoid combat, you won't get better in it, both in being experienced with the combat system and actually just getting the raw power from leveling up. Part of the game's JRPG heritage is that you can grind to basically outlevel all your enemies. A lot of Western RPGs don't allow or look down on grinding because on one hand, it is a sort of brainless repetition that doesn't provide gameplay challenge. However, I think grinding represents something that CRPGs don't often consider, which is that brainless repetition in real life is often one of the ways of bettering yourself. If you do 100 push-ups and sit-ups a day, most people will probably notice significant changes. Now, it might not turn you bald or let you one-punch Goku, but dedication and discipline are roads to strength. I also want to give players as many options as possible for playing the game the way they want to play. I don't see much value in limiting player choice simply to make a game harder. Although, speaking of difficulty, the game is a very mixed bag. Because you have the ability to grind for levels and buy some very powerful, probably borderline broken gear, I balanced most of the fights in the game to be a little more on the difficult side. I think some players have referred to many of the fights as being one-sided curb stomps, which I'll admit makes the Munchkin D&D player in me swell with pride. Now, you don't have to spend hours poring over your character sheet here, looking to exploit badly written rules so your sorcerer paladin multi-class with a 1-level dip in warlock can kill your DM's enthusiasm for ever inviting you over again. Shots fired, 5th edition. But there's so much here that you can pack into your characters that it's probably just badly designed. Yeah, the word balance isn't even in my dictionary. Anyways, I will save that for the next video, where I'll try to cover leveling, stats, and gear in greater detail. Okay, I'll catch all of you later.